Welcome to Caching Waves. This is an Elliott Wave update for BONK. So this one came to my attention. I've been going over my watch list, which has 200 plus cryptos on it. And this one crossed my path for a potential trade setup to the upside. Now, the requirements for these today, I'm looking at 200 plus cryptos, is setups on the daily candles. So each one of these candles is 1 day in time. And if you look at this chart, it looks quite messy. It's hard to figure out what's happening here. And what I suggest doing in that scenario is to switch to log scale to see the wave separation better. Now, it's important to understand that these are pretty deep retraces. In general, you can see this one candle here was a 32% drop right here, which I have proposed as my first wave 1 and 2. So it doesn't look like much of a correction, but it is. So I just wanted to make that clear. So if we pull from our pivots, it's the best setup I can find there, as our 1 and our 2, like so. You can see the 5-wave separation, 1 and 2. We then have our third come just past the 1.618 extension of wave 1 off wave 2, our fourth and our fifth up in 5. So it's hard to see, but if you switch to linear, you will get those corrections as they should be. Or you can just pull your measuring tool and see how much the actual correction was. That was 44% there for our fourth wave. As you can see, we had a shy wave 2, deeper wave 4. So have this labeled as either a wave 1 or wave A. 5 waves up. Okay, so now that we have that established, on log scale, we have a WXY complex combination. The issue being, there's always going to be an issue in this scenario, is this could also be A, B, C to the upside. This counts better as 5 to me, and I count this as 3, which is why I have it labeled as an X wave rather than a correction complete. So for those purposes, that's why I'm leaning towards this as an X wave. There's reasons behind it. I see this as 5. I see this as 3. So that's the reasoning behind that. I just want to make that clear. Now, if this collapses to the downside and makes new lows, obviously this was our top, and this would have to be a complex combination to the upside, and we would have had to work on linear scale hitting the 1-to-1. That's what you see in red there, or past it, sorry. It would actually be just past the 1-to-1. As you can see, we would have wicked through it. Okay, so establishing that this is my primary count, we have a WXY as a complex combination, and as you can see, I took the measurement of our W, projected it off our X. It came to the 1-to-1 to the tick right here. You can always also see that we channeled sideways as a running flat complex combo here, and we respected our trend line pretty much to the T. You can stretch that up a little bit more. WXY, you can see we pretty much came right to the bottom end of that channel and wicked through it and reversed off it. So knowing that, I'm going to zoom into this area in a moment, but I just want to make it clear on linear scale, the end of our correction here as wave 2 or B hit the 618 retracement of wave 1 for our wave 2. So on linear, we hit proper retracements, the 618 for a wave 2 or B. On log scale, we obviously just hit the 0.236. Similar to previously, you see moves like this and they look really shy. They're about 30% retraces, right? So in this scenario, if this is a wave 1 and 2, it's a very bullish setup because we have a flat. We make a higher high, higher low for our end of our correction. Now, I don't expect log scale targets to hit. I don't expect 6 cents. Like it's pretty insane. Yeah, very doubtful. So we're probably most likely going to be working on a linear scale for our targets. And our third wave would be about 40685 for if it's a third wave. So it'd be about 200% from current price. And off the low, it would be about 430%. So what I would expect is obviously a 5-wave move up like this, come back for our fourth, come up for our fifth, eventually ending somewhere between 4 zeros and an 8, 4 zeros and a 9. I don't even know how to pronounce that. You can leave it in the comments how to pronounce that, 4 zeros. But for purpose of this video, I'm saying 4 zeros. So we're going to discuss how this can fail as well as how this can take off. So how this can fail is if this correction ends up being bigger. Now, one thing, if you watch my videos, you know I've mentioned many times, we usually look for a 618 to a 1-to-1 for our correction to finish, which should have been in this area here, right? So when it takes longer than expected, I usually switch my primary to this is a B wave. Because what tends to take the longest are fourth waves or B waves, right? So if this is a 1-2, we would have expected it guidelines to finish earlier than it has. If it's a B wave, it's fine. So these are just guidelines, not rules, but I just want to make that clear that I would expect this to actually just be a C wave targeting the 1-to-1. So in this situation, it would basically be a double top, or we come to the 1.236 or the 382, somewhere in there. So between 4 zeros and 55, 40.6. So still a pretty decent setup. Low end about 116% from now's price, high end about 174, right? So pretty decent. This is the issue when you have to switch between log and linear. So how we can fail here is if this actually ends up becoming something different, where this becomes, this would be a W wave in itself over here, and we get extended out in time even more. This turns into a 3-wave move. Potentially pivot at around the 786. We've already hit the 618 of the move to the downside. So something like this, and then a 3 or 5-wave move down like this. And then I'd potentially relabel this as the initial setup as an ABC, and then we'd get our connector lower and potentially come down to our common areas here between the 382 and the 618, and then attempt a new high. Just wanted to be clear where we would end up failing here, and that is on the next move to the upside. But I'm going to talk about this on the smaller time frames. But as of right now, this is the pivot we would expect to hold with a WXY complete. As you can see, hitting the 1-to-1, lower end of the trend line. Everything looks good. There's no reason not to trade this. Not financial advice, just what I would do. And we'll zoom into this area now, down on the hourly. So this is the bottom of our Y I had labeled on the larger time frames, and the end of the correction. So from the bottom of our Y, I have 5 waves to the upside. Not ideal. This has to be a diagonal. Deep wave 2. You can see the separation for our 3rd, 4th, and 5th, which is all looking pretty good. Not ideal, but it has 5 waves in it, as you can see. And importantly, right now we're moving in 3s off the wave high. So what I'm looking for is a break of this trend line to the upside before I get into the setup. Now there's many different ways to trade this. One is you can buy between the 382 and the 50, DCA in, stop at the low, like so, targeting that higher target. In that scenario, this gets invalidated at 40122,002, the start of this wave. You can check on your exchange what that is. Areas of interest, we just tag the 1-to-1 of this W off our X. It looks like we have a zigzag for our W, three-wave move for an X, and this is making a flat 335 to the downside. So I would expect if this count is going to hold, it happens very soon here. You can see my targets, the 100, the 1.236, 1.382. And I'd get concerned past the 1.618. So in this scenario where we fail, this is our high. Just going to do this for reference. You can see we've just come through the 618 of the move to the downside. So in the scenario where we fail, I would actually expect this to get dragged out a little bit, come even as low as the 786, and end up making some sort of zigzag before we collapse to the downside, where this becomes a three-wave move, stop at the 786 area, and move to the downside. So in this scenario, if we don't move fast, we're kind of grinding sideways. You have to pay attention to the wave, how it fills out, and we don't just take off in a 1, 2, 3. Remember, a third wave should be the strongest. So this is, if this is a 1, 2, it should take off faster than the first wave, right? You can even put on your time fib. Look for the 1-to-1 in time, which I have over here, and it should pass the 1-to-1 in a faster amount of time once the correction is in. Okay, so that's just some guidelines you can use. But how I am going to play this is I'm waiting for this to pivot. Ideally, we hit the bottom end of this channel to the downside. I will then look for a break of this trend line, break trend, wait for our pullback, and then look for my entry, and my stop can go at this low. That's how I'm playing it, so I can get a much bigger position size than entering here and having all this as my stop. I prefer to wait for a break of structure and then just have this area as my stop, knowing that I might have to enter it several times. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. And worst case scenario, if we end up getting this zigzag, so we come a little bit deeper, and this turns into a three-wave pattern. Look between the 618 and the 1-to-1 to be considered complete. And if this is a 5-wave as labeled, we're looking for 5 waves up in a zigzag. So in this zone right here, between the 618 and the 1-to-1, depending where our pivot is. I'm just putting it at this area of support right here as an example. You'll have to adjust that yourself. Let's say we get this move down, we get 5 waves up, but it tags at the 1-to-1 and starts rejecting. You can take the measurement of the next move and put your stop to break even once we get up there, or you can also put your stop at the wave 1 high. Okay, just some examples of what you can do in these scenarios. But it's all going to be important as to what happens up in that area. If we get a 1-2, 1-2, it should look something like this. And that's where I'll look for my entry, stop here, and then we take off, right? So it's going to be following the path of this wave to get our probabilities long or short. But again, if we go out on the daily, you can see the setup yourself. It's very nice and pretty clean, and this is a very bullish structure if we are in a bull market for BONK. Flat is one of the best structures where we make a higher X wave, higher Y wave, protect the W. That's one of the best setups you can find if this is bullish. Again, if this is bullish. And validation of that again is 0012202. And where I'd expect rejection is if we pass the 618 and come to say the 786. Remember, a wave 2 should be between the 382 and the 618. So if we come past that and we end up getting the 786, it's not invalidated as a 1-2, but it does switch probabilities that this is just going to be an ABC and expecting further downside. So we'll see how far this correction comes. I'm watching it very carefully because this is a pretty nice setup on the daily, like I mentioned. All right, I hope I didn't complicate anything there. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I'm going to continue going over my watch list. This one is on the radar right now to get in long very shortly. All right, guys, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.